Welcome into another edition of Who's Number One. I'm Trey Wingo. Look, it's a fact. Sometimes the team that can't lose does. Sometimes the sure thing falters. Something happens. Fate, choke. Who said that? Injury. And the team that has everything ends up missing the one thing that's so important, a championship. So to celebrate, or mourn what might have been, here is ESPN Classic's ranking of the 20 best teams never to win it all.
2020.
The 1972 U.S. Olympic basketball team featured Doug Collins and Tom McMillan, extended America's unbeaten streak in the games to 63, and was expected to take an 8th gold medal. But in a controversial finish, the clock was repeatedly reset and the Soviet Union claimed a 51-50 upset.
The United States Olympic team has won every gold medal since 1936.
You might think that we felt a lot of pressure regarding the record, but we did.
I was 100% sure that we're going to win this thing.
We didn't play well. Now, there's no question that we did not play well in the game.
This is the youngest group ever to represent the United States. And now they find themselves with their backs totally to the wall.
We were very methodical. We were running plays that just didn't work against their defense.
Back to Tommy Anderson, gets off the shot, got a good shot. The Russians handled the rebound.
We played into their game, the slowdown game.
We only scored 50 points. I mean, that's not American basketball.
They were ahead. We came from behind. We won the basketball game.
But Doug Collins has perhaps won the game.
And that's how it should have ended.
2 seconds. The Russian coach and Hank Ivor are yelling at each other. And Bedlam has taken over here at the basketball hall. They're changing the clock. 3 seconds is what the PA announcer said. So we'll have to speculate that it's all over. Wow, what a finish. The United States winning their 8th consecutive gold medal.
We didn't get beat. We got cheated.
Now we're being told the scoreboard is not correct.
It could have been okay if we just got beat.
There is time for the Russians to go to their big man, Alexander Belov. They're going to try. Alexander Belov.
The scorekeeper did not sign the book. The game is still unofficial because he felt the United States won.
And this time it is over.
19.
The 2001 Mariners blitzed the American League, setting a record for wins with 116. Brett Boone posted the best numbers ever by an AL second baseman, and Ichiro Suzuki finessed 242 hits. But though Seattle had beaten the Yankees 6 of 9 in the regular season, it lost to New York in 5 games in the ALCS.
The best team that never got to a World Series simply by the sheer amount of victories they had during the course of the regular season.
Something that we've seen in the wild card era, you see these teams that are sort of quote-unquote built to win in the regular season don't really get it done in the short series format.
The double play.
But what they didn't have was the dominant starting pitching.
And if you don't have dominant starting pitching, it's very difficult to translate 116 wins into a World Series win.
Most of us thought they were underdogs going into the playoffs when they had to play the Yankees because they were playing the Yankees. Seattle was unstoppable during the regular season, but like most sports writers, we have to see them do it during the playoffs.
They had the misfortune of running into a Yankee team that was seasoned.
Swing and a high fly ball in deep to right field. Ichiro goes.
In particular, Ichiro. Give the Yankees scouts credit. They did a great job at figuring out a way to get him out.
Splitter, it's in the dirt.
Ichiro was the guy that made the Mariners go, and against the Yankees, he didn't do anything.
Sooner or later, there's going to be a bad break, or a team's going to get lucky, or you run into a hot team, and you're going to lose a game. I mean, that's just the way it is.
Led by the LCB line of Reggie Leach, Bobby Clark, and Bill Barber, the 1979-80 Philadelphia Flyers stitched together an incendiary stretch of 35 straight games without a loss. Despite that record 25-0-10 run, they lost to the Islanders in the Stanley Cup Finals in 6 games.
I consider that streak one of the truly great accomplishments of hockey that did not come with a trophy.
If you say the name Bob Nystrom to any longtime Flyers fan, the word association is going to be offside.
Pinelli, Sarriott, they score! Bob Nystrom! That may be
I don't think anything but a 4x6 piece of lumber would have stopped that puck.
It's the collision of this Flyers team, which had this unbelievable regular season, that was looking to change its image from the Broad Street Bullies.
Dirtiest team I ever saw. They brought hockey into the dark ages. They hurt its reputation in ways that still plague the sport.
They had talent, they had goal scorers, they had a rock-solid defense.
And they happened to run into an Islanders team that was just starting its ascendancy.
I don't know if they could beat you any way, though, and that's what they ran into. They ran into a team that could beat you any way.
17.
In the Fiesta Bowl in a showdown for the 1986 National Championship, #1 Miami was upset by #2 Penn State. Heisman winner Vinny Testaverde was intercepted 5 times as Jimmy Johnson's unbeaten Hurricanes were held 28 points below their average in a 14-10 loss.
All I can remember is the screw-ups.
Testaverde far side, Irvin juggles it, and is incomplete.
Mistake after mistake after mistake after mistake, and you just figured, well, eventually they'll turn it on.
As time slips a bit, throws, it's intercepted.
Testaverde could do anything. At that time, he had fast legs.
Testaverde steps away again, got out of the arms of 2 rushers, and finally the 3rd man gets it.
Great arm. He had great people to throw to, and then he decided to throw to the other team.
Testaverde with a poor selection, threw it right in the hands of Shane Conlon.
He was open.
It made Joe Paterno look like a genius.
Penn State defense did a tremendous job. As good as that Miami team was, the better team won that night.
People perceive things to be flukish. I don't believe in that. I think if you won, you won.
Intercepted, Giftopoulos. The Penn State Nittany Lions are the national champions.
Miami threw that game away, and it has probably haunted the program even with all its successes ever since.
16.
Another in Krzyzewski's long line of great teams, but they didn't get it done that night.
Led by Elton Brand and Trajan Langdon, the 98-99 Duke team won 37 of its first 38 games, equaling the NCAA record for wins. But in the national title game, the Blue Devils were toppled by UConn 77-74.
Langdon with 3. Langdon's going to lose the dribble. He trips. It's over. It's all over.
It didn't even feel like an upset as I watched it. There weren't outrageous breaks that UConn got.
Hit by Elamine. Spaghetti gets it back. He turns, gets it look. It's stolen by Elamine.
UConn looked like the superior team on the floor.
That team went all the way through the ACC unbeaten, just otherworldly.
The Duke basketball team, 98-99, loses to UConn in the final because they can't do anything about Richard Hamilton.
Hamilton left side, 3.
The whole game had a different feel from the entire season.
There is no Final Four without Duke, and so with Trajan Langdon there, it looked like one more time for Duke. Instead, it was the first time for UConn.
UConn, you bet!
15.
Back in those days, if you had a tie ball game with Notre Dame, you were going to lose the vote.
Doc Blanchard and Glenn Davis were expected to lead Army to its 3rd straight national title in 1946. But the Cadets, who had pummeled Notre Dame the previous 2 years, were held to a scoreless tie by the Irish and finished runner-up to them in the AP poll due to only beating their rival Navy by 3 in the season's final game.
What a team. I mean, they had 2 Heisman Trophy winners in the backfield. They had the cream of the American athlete at that time because guys had gone to West Point, they had come back there after the war.
Once someone asked me, what is your claim to fame? And I said, that's the easiest question I ever had asked. I played on the football team with Doc Blanchard and Glenn Davis. That's my claim to fame.
The whole club was a pretty mature football team. Earl Blake, no question, great coach. You could take that football team and put them out there today, and I would wager a small amount that they would run all over everything, regardless of size today.
We had a lot of respect for the Army team. They came after you, but it was clean.
14.
The 1988 A's rode the muscle of the Bash brothers, Jose Canseco and Mark McGuire, to 104 wins. But in the World Series made memorable by Kirk Gibson's gimpy leg Game 1 homer off Dennis Eckersley, the Dodgers handled Oakland in 5.
High fly ball into right field. She is gone.
They had a powerful club.
They were so much better than everybody else. They won 104 games. I think that may have set them up for failure in the World Series because they were not tested.
Dave Stewart was the ace of that staff at 120 games.
They rang the opening bell, and it was like a buffalo stampede. I mean, they just ran over everybody.
Now they face a Los Angeles Dodger team that is the worst team to have won a World Series.
And there's a drive to center. Back goes Shelby to the wall. It is gone.
6'4", 245 pounds, and he's running down balls in the outfield. I thought, boy, this must be Roy Hobbs.
If you went right through the lineup, certainly they were of a size more commensurate with a football team.
We had some big boys. I mean, they were intimidating anyway because they had so much power, but, nobody was going to fight us.
It created sort of a swagger among the team that was something that people enjoyed, not only in Oakland, but we were a great road draw that year, too. The A's almost looked superhuman. When you faced 3 or 4 of these guys, and they were all huge men taking savage swings, this really looked like a murderer's row.
13.
Randall Cunningham did the passing and Randy Moss the catching as the 98 Vikes went 15-1 in the regular season. But in the NFC Championship game, Gary Anderson, who had made his last 46 field goal attempts, missed a crucial kick late in the fourth quarter, and Atlanta won in overtime, 30-27.
13.
It was tough to take if you were a Vikings fan.
I was stunned when they lost the game.
That defense had a pass rush that was as good as the old Purple People Eater days. And it just looked like everything was in place.
It was like this whole package was put together, and then there was this bonus of this young, skinny, 6'4" kid.
We've got a star on our hands in the NFL, Randy Moss.
I would roll to the left and be looking at the last second. I say, I'm willing to take a hit because I know once I throw this ball down, that man's going to catch it and put it in the end zone.
Cunningham under pressure. Hennessy throws. Moss.
He believed so much in himself. He would tell me, throw it out there and I'll go get it.
Started out strong, and then you could just see the necks get a little bit tighter and tighter, and Cunningham missing passes as he had completed all season. Atlanta playing freewheeling football, and that was just a recipe for disaster.
12.
The pitching-rich 1969 Orioles had 20-game winners in Mike Cuellar and Dave McNally, and Jim Palmer went 16-4 for first-year manager Earl Weaver. But after racking up 109 wins in the regular season, Baltimore succumbed to the Miracle Mets in the World Series in 5 games.
I don't think anybody can ever fully explain how the Mets beat the Orioles that year.
Frank Robinson, Brooks Robinson, Jim Palmer, Mike Cuellar, Dave McNally, Paul Blair, Boog Powell at first base. We won 109 ball games that year, and I guess that qualifies us for being one of the best.
Blair lays down a perfect fly. Here comes Belanger to score the winning run. The Orioles win the next 2 and sweep the Twins to become the American League champions.
There's no way the Mets, with that weak lineup that they threw out there, could ever beat the Orioles. The Mets were terrible the year before.
If you were gambling on it, you'd have to be stupid to bet the Mets.
We had a pretty good ball club, and we excelled in all phases of the game.
It was a team without a weakness.
It was a great Oriole team, but with great pitching. But the Mets pitching was so overpowering. And October is power pitching month.
Now, you got to remember that they had Nolan Ryan and Tom Seaver on that ball club, who eventually went to the Hall of Fame. I think we were over-anxious to show the rest of the world just how good we were. And as a result, we were too anxious and didn't do the things that we did during the course of the regular season.
11.
The 1954 Indians appeared to be without flaw. They had a pair of 23-game winners in Early Wynn and Bob Lemon, batting champ Bobby Avila and home run and RBI leader Larry Doby. Cleveland won 111 games, at the time an AL record. But in the World Series, the Tribe crumbled, swept by the Willie Mays-led Giants.
We were always the bridesmaid, never the bride. In 1954, everything came together for our ball club. We then became a team of destiny. Nobody after that period would recognize what a great team we had in '54.
The Indians were prohibitive favorites.
They had 4 Hall of Fame pitchers on that staff, and yet they wind up getting swept.
Vic Wirtz, a good Cleveland hitter, had a monstrous drive in the Polo Grounds. And Willie ran back and back and back, and that is maybe the most famous picture ever taken of an outfield catch. And caught the ball on the way to Queens. As he caught it, he whirled, and he threw it back into the infield, so there was no significant advance by base runners.
After that first game, the Indians probably said to themselves, what do we have to do to beat this team?
The single biggest reason why the New York Giants upset the Indians was Dusty Rhodes.
Rhodes cuts at the first pitch. And there goes the ball down the right field line. A home run, and the ball game's over.
It wound up that this unknown guy made a shambles of this great, vaunted pitching staff of Cleveland's.
10.
In 1969, for the second straight year under Joe Paterno, Penn State went 11-0. And for the second straight year, the Nittany Lions, led by All-Americans Mike Reed and Dennis Onkonce, won the Orange Bowl. Yet they were voted number 2 in the polls behind Texas.
The 1969 Penn State team lost the championship when President Nixon injected himself into the argument.
The AP and the UPI will name Texas number 1.
I think that turned Joe Paterno into a huge Democrat there for a while.
They didn't win the national championship because it was a ballot box gig back in those days. The Midwest and the South didn't support Penn State.
I think Joe had every right to be upset about that because, you know, we played, I think, a tougher schedule. And we came down to the wire and played a tougher team in the Orange Bowl.
They were probably the first team in modern college football to lose a national championship based on strength of schedule. Eventually, it led to Penn State joining the Big Ten.
9.
The 74-75 Indiana team was one of Bob Knight's powerhouses, led by future NBA players Scott May, Quinn Buckner, and Kent Benson. In an NCAA regional final, the 29-0 Hoosiers faced Kentucky, a team they had crushed earlier by 24. This time, Indiana went belly up, 92-90.
That team, Knight has always insisted, was a better team than the 76 team, and it probably was. Quinn Buckner was a terrific point guard. Kent Benson was the center. They built around them.
The loss junior year made us the team that we were my senior year that went undefeated because it gave us more resolve. It taught you about taking things for granted.
To go in unbeaten, to go in with national championship hopes, and to lose the way we did, and for me personally to not play, you know, and be 100%. I think I played like maybe a minute or so, but to be 100% was really tough.
To lose that game was certainly a devastating event.
I ended up trying to figure out what to do on spring break because I'd not been on spring break before, and I was miserable. And I said, this isn't happening again.
8.
Joe Montana and Jerry Rice spun their pitch and catch magic for the '90 San Francisco 49ers. Montana threw for 26 scores, Rice snagging 13, and the Niners under coach George Seifert went 14-2. But in the NFC title game, they went down. They didn't give up a touchdown, but still lost to the Giants 15-13.
Jeff Hostetler, Joe Montana, you've got to be kidding me. I mean, there's no way that Jeff Hostetler is going to beat Joe Montana in San Francisco. No way.
Joe Montana had to be, without a doubt, one of the greatest quarterbacks to ever play the game. I think the guy had unbelievable vision and the ability to know where all his personnel is every time the ball is snapped and know where he's supposed to go with the football. A slippery style. laid-back, lazy flow, very proficient within his offense. And very much not the kind of guy to make a lot of mistakes.
Unfortunately, it was Joe Montana getting hurt and then Roger Craig's fumble.
49ers were going to be the three-peat team, and it looked like they might have the game in hand.
That's how the Giants beat them, without ever scoring a touchdown.
Coach Tom Osborne elected to go for the win and gambled the 1983 National Championship on that decision in the Orange Bowl. With 48 seconds left, unbeaten #1 Nebraska scored a touchdown to pull within 31-30 of Miami. Osborne ordered up the two-point conversion. It failed.
They scored more than 40 points in 9 games that season. It's easy to understand how they could score so many points when you have an offense that has Mike Rozier, Turner Gill.
Turner Gill is in for a Cornhusker touchdown.
The team was basically unstoppable.
I know they didn't win. That was the best team I ever saw, by far.
Somehow I wasn't quite measuring up. And it would have made life a lot easier, I think, had we completed that two-point play.
I think in a way categorizing Nebraska's this particular edition of the Cornhuskers as a big loser is a little unfair.
If we had kicked the extra point, we would have won the national championship, but it's kind of like backing in.
And, you know, everybody can second guess it after it happens. And if it was negative, you did the wrong thing. If you would have done it, if you would have went for 2 and they would have won, he would have been the hero.
I know for a fact that Coach Osborne does not regret, ever, not for a moment. He didn't regret it then, and he doesn't regret it now.
6.
The intergalactic Bills, nobody's going to stop them with that offense.
The 1990 Buffalo Bills were loaded, including quarterback Jim Kelly, running back Thurman Thomas, and sackmaster Bruce Smith. They went 13-3 and averaged an NFL best 27 points a game. But in Super Bowl 25, they were held to 19 and lost by 1 to the Giants when Scott Norwood went
Wide right.
6.
I just remember that game that we didn't see that much of the Buffalo Bills.
The Bills were the exciting offensive team with all the great weapons, with the run and gun. It was such an open offense.
You're coming off a 48-point win in the AFC Championship game. You had scored 44 points the week before.
This Bills team scored a lot of points, and the feeling was that there wasn't another team that could keep pace with this offense.
Thomas again. Thurman does it all.
The Bills had the ball for 19 minutes and change and scored 19 points. The Giants had the ball for 40-plus minutes and scored 20 points.
In that Super Bowl, what the Bills did best worked to a certain degree, but the Giants came up with some incredible strategy to frustrate them.
Bill Parcells and his team relished the role that they were going to play.
They don't do it the conventional way. No, they sure don't.
The Buffalo Bills were in this game and were in position to win this game at the very end, so by no means do I think the Bills were overwhelmed.
It shouldn't have come down to that.
Now Norwood tries to kick his longest ever on grass.
When you're talking about a 47-yard field goal on grass to win the Super Bowl, you're not talking about something that's very easy to do.
If Norwood had made that field goal, I think Kelly would have received as much credit.
We wouldn't have made it to that point if it wasn't for number 11. I know what he meant to us, and to see it come down to one kick, being the difference between somebody looking at somebody as a champion to somebody looking at somebody say, oh, they lost the Super Bowl. It's devastating.
Even without the legendary Johnny Unitas, sidelined with injury and replaced by Earl Morrall, the 1968 Colts went 13-1. Coach Don Shula's machine was a 19-point favorite over the upstart Jets in Super Bowl III. But Joe Namath delivered on his brash will-win guarantee. Jets 16, Colts 7.
We didn't know how tough they were. We had heard a lot about them. But after that first play broke clean and I got up and walked away, I came back to the huddle. I said, these guys are not so tough. And everybody sort of laughed. That sort of relaxed us, you know. And we went on and played the game.
It was just shocking. Even Jet fans, who might have hoped that they would make a game of it, didn't think they had much of a chance to win the game.
We were confusing everybody that year, and Namath was able to handle our blitz, and that was one of the big reasons in the Super Bowl that they upset us, because he handled it like nobody else was able to handle it.
Now, I understand that you came in as a Baltimore supporter. Are you changing your mind?
Well, actually, I think that the Jets forgot to read the papers.
As much as Coach Schuller and his coaches tried to get those guys to believe they were going to have a tough game, it was hard to believe. You know, you just win your championship 34-0 against the Cleveland Browns. Shut them out, beat them up. The other best team in the league. You beat 34-0, but now you're going to worry about the AFL?
Things went the wrong way for us during the game.
Flat, intercepted.
We moved the football, but we didn't put points on the board. That's the biggest thing. We got down there 3 times and didn't score.
When the ball hit the shoulder pad and went into Randy Beverly's hands in the end zone in the first half, not going to happen. It was too much magic the other way for Unitas then to sap all the magic away from the Jets. It's 1969. The Rebels were supposed to beat the establishment.
The 1984-85 Georgetown team, anchored by Patrick Ewing and coached by John Thompson, was a 9.5-point favorite over Villanova, a team the Hoyas had beaten twice to win a second straight national championship. But Nova played a practically perfect game, shot 79% from the floor, and pulled off a 66-64 upset.
4.
Patrick Ewing that year scared people.
We were the Raiders of college basketball. Everybody hated us, and we loved kicking everybody's butts.
Ewing came out and blocked everything in sight, even if it was goaltending, trying to intimidate the Wildcats. I mean, that's what the Hoyas were about. They were an intimidating presence on the floor.
I'd seen Georgetown play maybe 15 times that year, and I knew that there was always a point in time during a game where they would just overwhelm you defensively, and there wasn't much you can do to stop it.
Villanova always give us trouble.
Wayne McClain, the running one-hander off the glass and good.
Villanova has played Georgetown. They're not afraid. The mystique of Georgetown doesn't exist among Big East teams because they see it all the time.
They were, more witty. They didn't want to tussle with us. They would have never won the game, so they used finesse.
Every cylinder within our Villanova crew was operating, on another level.
They didn't miss any shots.
One of the greatest upsets in the history of NCAA basketball, and would not have happened for the shot clock.
We played a lot of games like we played that day against them where everything was going right. Perfect.
Patrick Ewing and Georgetown could not get into the up-tempo rhythm that they needed to pull the game out.
Rollie controlled that game and controlled Georgetown.
Cinderella wears the glass slipper.
He really outcoached John Thompson.
3.
The Phi Slamma Jamma game. That was a great group of guys.
3.
Phi Slamma Jamma, you have this unique fraternity.
It looked like the worst sort of mismatch. Houston's 1982-83 Phi Slamma Jamma aerialists, featuring Akeem Olajuwon and Clyde Drexler, against Jim Valvano's North Carolina State team that dragged 10 losses into the national title game. Houston lost a slow-down game 54-52 on a last-second dunk.
Phi Slamma Jamma, they were outstanding. The big guy, Olajuwon, and you got Clyde the Glide Drexler. I mean, they had some outstanding talent.
And here comes Jim Valvano and this ragtag North Carolina State team.
It still seems crazy to this day because the only thing they didn't do really well was shoot free throws.
We played great defense. Everything we wanted to do, we did. The guy shoots an air ball, you think perfect. The game goes in overtime. There's Lorenzo Charles down there.
The Cinderella team has done it! It was showtime for Jimmy Valvano. He didn't allow them to control tempo. He didn't allow them to go up and down the floor.
Houston loses. I thought sure we had it. That was the year.
If we played them 20 times, I still don't think they'd win but one game. I tip my hat to them then, and I tip my hat to them now.
2-2-2-2.
You think of it like it was a 30-point loss, and you look up at the scoreboard at the end of the game, and it was 79-77.
I just feel so bad for the kids because it's the greatest group of kids I've ever been around, and you know, I just hurt inside for them.
The 1990-91 UNLV team, featuring Larry Johnson and Stacey Augmon, toyed with most opponents in rolling up 34 wins. But the unbeaten Runnin' Rebels, who had crushed Duke by 30 in the previous national title game, were upset by the avenging Blue Devils 79-77 in the Final Four.
The year before in the championship game, we played an A-plus game against a very good team, again, the same team, but they were a year from maturation, and so were we, but they may have matured a little bit more.
What a great job Jerry Tarkanian did in molding that group of guys, getting them to play so hard every night.
Coach Turk always talked about not so much winning games, but just playing hard and giving maximum effort, and that winning would take care of itself. And that had happened the year before with the run we made in the NCAA tournament.
103-73, the final score. UNLV wins the national championship.
The fans there had come to Indianapolis, and everybody was expecting to stay till Monday. We were figuring that the Saturday game against Duke was going to be a formality.
It all started pregame. We're in the locker room, and we're believing that we can beat anybody anytime. Our confidence level was so high. Larry Johnson on the college level was as dominant a player as I have ever seen. I'm not sure there's ever been anyone more man among boys than he was.
They could run you off the court by fast breaks. They could go beyond the perimeter and shoot.
What hurt them probably winning another one would be the fact that they really hadn't been pushed very hard.
Down to Laker, they double team, triple team, shots up and in. And who would have thought you could take it inside?
Sometimes you need a loss to wake you up.
I was sitting up behind the Rebel bench with about 8 or 9 seconds left. They had the ball. You just sort of felt that they were going to do something to at least tie the game because this team had succeeded so many times before.
Now to Johnson, make him bring it up with 9 seconds left. Johnson to the right side. Johnson fakes.
He had an open three-pointer, an open three-pointer. This is your player of the year, Larry Johnson, and he passed the ball.
Looking, 5 seconds to Hunt. Anderson Hunt stops, fires a 3. No! It's off the mark! It's over! The Blue Devils have pulled off the biggest upset in the history of basketball!
It was like the bullies got punched in the mouth and they didn't know how to respond.
We had gotten the best of Duke the year before, and they're too good of a ball club for somebody to come in and beat them by 30 points again. To this day, I don't think people in this town have ever gotten over that loss.
Welcome back to Who's Number One and the 20 best teams never to win it all. Here's the list so far. 1972 U.S. Olympic basketball team.
19.
2001 Seattle Mariners. 79-80 Philadelphia Flyers.
17.
1986 Miami football team.
16.
1998-99 Duke basketball team.
15.
1946 Army football team.
14.
1988 Oakland A's.
13.
1998 Minnesota Vikings.
12.
1969 Baltimore Orioles.
11.
1954 Cleveland Indians.
10.
1969 Penn State football team.
9.
1974-75 Indiana basketball team.
8.
1990 San Francisco 49ers.
7.
1983 Nebraska football team.
6.
1990 Buffalo Bills.
5.
1968 Baltimore Colts.
4.
1984-85 Georgetown basketball team.
3.
1982-83 Houston basketball team.
2.
1990-91 UNLV basketball team.
There's no way around it. This list is bittersweet. And here is, if you'll pardon the expression, the winner. The team number one that was never number one. The 1980 Soviet Olympic hockey team was considered impregnable and unbeatable. In group play, odd opponents were crushed. But in the medal round, in the celebrated miracle on ice, the Soviets panicked, pulled their star goalie Vladislav Tretiak, and were upset by the U.S. 4-3.
Do you believe in miracles? Yes!
American athletes were really up against a professional class of state-subsidized athletes.
They never smiled. They never showed any emotion whatsoever. They were machine-like. They're Soviet soldiers. They work in the army. They play together year-round. They live together year-round.
The 79-80 Soviet team was believed to be, they thought, the best team ever put together. Not just the best Russian team, the best team, period.
You see Petrov and Kharlamov, Mikhailov, and you're like, wow, those are the guys I've been watching on TV for the last 10 years.
I would marvel at their passing, having played hockey as a kid and watched it my whole life. Their passing was astounding, and they had this swagger about themselves that you just couldn't help but be mesmerized by their style.
They could move into the NHL and dominate the NHL. And I covered the exhibition game just a few days before the Olympics were to start. And not only were the Americans overwhelmed, they just looked completely in awe of these guys.
Breaking down the right side is Malchev. Look at this play. He scored! Oh, what a beating.
You thought there's no way in hell that these kids are going to win at Lake Placid. You just hoped it wouldn't get to double digits.
We worry about only Czech Republic. Other team, we don't worry because we're a strong team.
The Russians did score first. For a minute, there was, well, here we go again.
This Russian team probably would have won the Stanley Cup that year.
The Russians began to get a little bit too full of themselves. David and Goliath, and why wouldn't Goliath think he's going to win?
They had a crowd. They had the whole country behind them, you know, and that was huge.
When their coach, Tikhonov, had pulled Tretiak, that was his way of telling his team, hey, don't screw around with these guys.
Too cocky. That's what led to them not winning.
When the camera showed the eyes of the Soviet players, there was disbelief.
We lost to the college guys. It's impossible.
So that's our accounting of what never was, and for 20 teams, never will be. Agree or disagree with the rankings? Well, who better to debate disappointment than our resident second guessers? Gentlemen, go to town.
This is unprecedented. This is exciting. And this, Mike, I think is well-deserved. We are going to open the commentary with a well-deserved round of applause for the committee. That's a good job. Yeah. Because as much as I want to, I can't disagree with number one or with number two.
And I'm going to tell you what. Number one, the 1980 Soviet Olympic hockey team. Now, this team helped give us one of the greatest American moments ever with the Miracle on Ice. But this team was one of the most dominant teams I had ever seen.
I can't argue with that one, and I can't argue with UNLV either. That UNLV team, and I say this to our colleague here at ESPN, Greg Anthony, every time I see him, that was the best college basketball team I ever saw. With Johnson and Augman and Anthony and Hunt and Ackles. That team was so dominant, and I can't argue with 3 and 4 either. That Houston team, the Phi Slama Jam, and Georgetown, because college basketball is the sport, because of the format. We love March Madness, but it lends itself more than any other sport to the best team not winning.
Could there have been two more athletic teams than the Houston team and then the UNLV team? I mean, and to see them lose in those games that they did, I agree with you. Those teams were great, and they were both shocking losses.
Villanova pitching the perfect game against Georgetown.
Right. And I wonder at number 5 with the Baltimore Colts, you wonder, was that overstated a bit? Was there that much difference between these two teams?
I'll tell you who doesn't want to hear it, and that's Joe Namath himself. I asked him one time, Joe, were you really better than the Colts? Did you really believe you were going to beat the Colts? And he said to me, he's paused, and he said, I'll tell you what, Greenie, I really believe if we had played them 10 times, they might have beaten us once.
I just think there was so much of the not known then. And the Colts, 18-point favorite in that game. We certainly know how it went. I want to give a little love to the 86 Miami Hurricanes. That was a great team that averaged 38 points a game, and what a matchup with Penn State, Joe Paterno and Jimmy Johnson. I thought they would wipe the field with Penn State. They were a great football team that just absolutely fell apart on one night.
And one more worthy of focusing on is the Bills in 90, when they were a better team than the Giants, and they lose on the Norwood field goal miss.
But all I was here chanting after that was, laces out, Dan, laces out.
So once again, however, in summation, we must say, for maybe the first and I think last time, hey, guys on the committee, you did a nice job.
Now it's time to see how you, the fan, voted on Sports Nation on ESPN.com. Number 5, 1990-91 UNLV men's basketball. 4, 1998-99 Duke men's basketball. 3, 1980 Soviet hockey. 2, 1998 Minnesota Vikings. And number 1, the 2001 Seattle Mariners. So that's it for this edition of Who's Number 1. Thanks for joining us for ESPN Classic's ranking of the 20 best teams never to win it all. We will be back to continue our countdown of the teams, the athletes, and the events that have shaped our world of sports. Until then, I'm Trey Wingo. Let the debating begin.